This leads me to, I think, a related question about scale. You know, this book comes at such an interesting moment. I think there's a real preference among the English-speaking North American left for forms of radicalism that emphasize small-scale collectives, marronage, utopias, the politics of the peripheries. And while these projects all oppose capitalism, these visions often fall in alignment with a neoliberal state that encourages informal mutual support networks while it ravages the social infrastructure. So I wonder what a return to Walter Rodney with his big questions about state power, revolution, and organizing mass class alliances means at this particular moment.
Okay.
Yeah, what does it mean?
I mean, firstly, I mean, everybody has a different role. So some people might be more confident and comfortable working at different scales, which is important because in the journey of our radicalism, I think we learn something from small-scale experiments. So there is some value to that. I mean, for instance, from Leftward, we just published a book on one of the oldest cooperatives in India, Construction Workers Cooperative, which is continuing to function today. The book is called Development Alternatives. Very good book. Why I'm saying that is that I think that we are at a particularly cruel stage of human history where all kinds of radicalism is necessary at all fronts, you know. But I think I would suggest that exclusive concentration on one front or one scale or the other is the problem.
Right.
And that I think to believe that you don't have to engage the state is surrender in some way.
Right.
I mean, it's okay, and it may be the case that in Vermont or in places like that, you know, small-scale activity is possible and has real tangible effects to help poor people who are starving in a small state like that in the United States. But let's take the case of India. 700 people have gone to sleep this night hungry. 700 million people. You know, that's almost 1 in 2 Indians. That's twice the population of the United States. Now, we don't talk about poverty in India anymore because the bourgeois media tends to focus on other things. And those who concentrate on poverty in India are quite irritating because they just moralize about the issue. You know, they'll either say that, you know, let's do something, raise some funds, buy a child, that sort of thing.
Right.
But this is a problem that cannot be tackled in a small-scale way. It requires a very big-scale intervention. But remember, Lula in Brazil attempted one of the most heroic anti-hunger initiatives. Even though he did it in a social democratic framework, Fome hunger, zero hunger, was a very crucial policy. And I think, you know, the Brazilians will have an election in October. Lula has been illegally put in prison. I'm really quite surprised that there is not a hue and cry among left forces in the United States about this theft of democracy, this soft coup or whatever it's called, golpe suave. Sounds so great in Portuguese, golpe suave, this soft coup in Brazil. I mean, in Brazil, they were able, through state power, in a social democratic framework, to remove Brazil from the world hunger map. And after this so-called soft coup, Brazil has crept up and will be returned to the world hunger map. So what I would say is that let's not be too sectarian in our attitude towards different scales of change. I think we should really welcome it when people work in any scale where they are comfortable. Let's try to learn from their experiments and see what is, you know, can be made in a mass level, what cannot be, what can only be done at a small scale level. Let's study these things carefully. Let's spend some time and energy looking at these things with seriousness. But friends, when some of our comrades, such as in Brazil, attempt a large-scale experiment, when they are overthrown, don't wipe your hands on your pants and walk away saying, well, they made X, Y, Z mistakes.
Right.
Because, you know, that is really the most irritating thing about how solidarity is understood today. You know, people just want purity. They don't understand, as Robin was saying, they don't understand the muck of making a change. So I think your assessment of James and Rodney is spot on. Again, I think James is a brilliant person, and I see you've written the foreword to Paul Buell's reissued book. Yeah. It's a great book. You should read it. James is a very important intellectual, but it's absolutely spot on that he didn't have the experiences of, confronting every day, walking from Rodney's house to the University of Dar es Salaam, up that hill. Sorry, that's me. Up that hill every day and encountering, on that hill, poverty. Right. And I think that's why I would be a little sympathetic to the multiplicity of our struggle. I mean, for God's sake, get involved at any scale.
Exactly.
But get involved.
Yeah. No, that's true. That's true. I totally agree. In fact, let me just say, I'm 100% behind that. In fact, I would even add that it's not as if neoliberalism doesn't scale up. We have China. All the possibilities of state power in the name of socialism is also captured by neoliberalism. So I don't know if it's necessarily about small scale. I completely agree. And I think there's two things I would add to that. One is we've got to pay attention to those attempts that actually are a combination of small scale and governance. And I think about Jackson, Mississippi, in the attempt to create a kind of cooperative commonwealth. And Jackson has its struggles right now, all kinds of contradictions and struggles going on. But this is a case of trying to govern on the one hand at a city scale, but also trying to develop forms of production and survival, not just survival, but ways of actually distributing wealth and creating, ending poverty and creating homes for people who don't have homes with limited resources available. We have to pay attention and we have to support them. So I think about what we often don't talk about is where solidarity sometimes has all this possibility when people emerge from the globe and center in a particular place. Cuba, Venceremos, the idea of people coming to Cuba to sort of build socialism. Guatemala in 1954, the overthrow of the regime in Guatemala, it wasn't just about United Fruit. It was about the fact that Guatemala became the center for a lot of Latin American radicals to organize there. Guatemala is where Castro and Che Guevara and others had their base. You think about the Spanish Civil War and what it meant to have international brigades to defend something that could be a socialist experiment, whatever contradictions within that. So Vijay is absolutely right. We need to think about Chiapas. There's so many other examples of moments in where what appears to be small scale is actually at a global scale. As long as we can be connected, as long as we're willing to defend those struggles. And it's a very hard thing to do when terms like internationalism don't have the same meaning or cachet or strength. And that's where, again, go back to the Rodney book, he opens up the book in that first chapter talking about what is Black studies. And he says, Black studies is not just the study of Black people, it's a study of the world from our perspective. And that's why I'm writing this book about the Russian Revolution. So we need to do that instead of sort of falling back, because the question of scale and the question of perspective isn't just about organizing or creating experiments of cooperation, it's our intellectual scale, which I think is often limited.